Hey guys, Chari5 here, and today we have Ghostface from Scream. This time, what I think is really interesting about the character is that it's not just one villain, but multiple villains. Because, in case you haven't watched the series, this is actually, again, one of the series that I've only watched until recently. So I don't really have much of a history with really many of these characters that I'm drawing, but I have at least somewhat of a history. I have more of a history with Ghostface than I do with other characters. Of course, growing up in Mexico, the Scream movies aren't really all that popular, so whenever we see Ghostface, the immediate thing we think of is Scary Movie. To be more specific, the first one, of course, but we see Ghostface as the icon of the Scary Movie franchise as a whole, despite the fact that he was only parodied in the first one. And I guess it's because we're more familiar with that movie than we are the actual Scream movies. And I know for sure that I saw Scream, not that I saw Scream, that I saw Scary Movie far before I saw Scream. But the reason that I even got interest in it was, I don't remember how long ago it was. I guess my parents or someone, I don't know how, but we got the DVD for Scream 4, which is the latest movie in the franchise, and I just never watched it. Like, we had it there, but I never popped it in because I felt like, well, why would I start in the middle of the franchise? So one day, I think they were showing it on TV because it was around this time. It might have been last year that I saw these films for the very first time. They were showing Scream on TV, and I don't know, for some reason I got really, really hooked. Like, it wasn't out of any interest in watching it specifically, but it was on, and I left it there. I was like, okay, well, let's see what this is about. And it was probably like halfway through the film, and I don't know, I thought personally that it was really, really interesting. And in fact, it might have been my sister who was watching it, not me, and that's like, we were watching it together. I don't remember, but we did end up watching the series together. And I do think that it's great how consistent they stayed, in terms of the characters, in terms of so many things. And when it comes to names, I'm terrible with them. The only one I can remember is Sydney, who is the main character. And just because there are three main characters, basically. Sydney, the cop, whose name I cannot remember, and I can't even remember the actress's name. But the reporter, Gail, I think her name is. What the hell is the name of the actress who played her? Wow, I love her, and I can't. Courtney Cox, yes, thank you. And it was, to me, really interesting because that was the first role that she did I think that was the first movie role she did while she was on Friends, and it was something that she said herself, that she wanted to do a character that was just a straight-up bitch. And that's why she loved the role that she got in Scream, because she was a nosy reporter, and, she did anything to get what she wanted to do, to get the news that she wanted. And I thought she was a great character. Like, she was a character that you liked, but at the same time hated. And the cop was a character that was just so sweet and really nice. Sydney was maybe not a relatable character, but she was also someone that you wanted to see succeed. And to me, I think the biggest appeal to the franchise is the element of trying to figure out which one of the characters we've seen is the one behind the mask. Because it did break, I think, some new ground. I might be completely wrong about that, but it is a horror trope that you don't see too often. It's very much a mystery. The element of mystery is more so what I tried to say earlier. but it's that element of mystery that you don't see all too often. It kind of almost felt like a Scooby-Doo episode, I think, where it's like, okay, you know what, if you're watching the movie for the first time, you don't really get that sense of mystery, you know, because to you it's just like, oh, well, he's just a villain. It doesn't really matter who's behind the mask, because it normally never does. The fact of the matter is we know it's a killer. And then they hit us with, oh, it's not one killer, but it's two killers at the same time. So that explains why you were suspecting everyone of being the killer, and yet at the same time it didn't make sense. Because it's like, well, okay, they all have an alibi, and we all know that none of them can be the villain because we've seen them in different scenes and stuff like that. So then when it's revealed that it's two people working together, it's like, whoa, you know, I think that was a pretty big reveal. And I do think that these movies are very important because they get mystery done really well. Even if at times the motive behind why they're stalking Sydney and, you know, why they're going on this murder spree does end up being a little bit like, they do end up being stretches. Like, I remember, I think it was like the second movie where it turns out that the killer, it turns out that like it was two people working together, and one of them was the mother of one of the killers in the first movie. It's like, okay, there's no damn way we could have known. Like, it's an interesting twist, but it is kind of cheap in the sense that, well, that's not fair. We saw you in one scene and we didn't even know who you were. Like, there's no way we could have deduced it was you. Because we didn't know who you were, we didn't know your backstory, therefore we couldn't really pinpoint the motive. But at least for the other characters, like, okay, well, it makes sort of sense. The third one, I have a hard time remembering what happens in that one specifically. The fourth one, I was kind of afraid, like, maybe it's gonna suck, maybe, like, the whole mystery and everything is gonna be bad. And to my surprise, no, I do think the fourth one holds up really well. And I honestly do like when in movies, you know, you acknowledge previous entries in the series. That's something that I always think is great. And I think that Scream is a franchise that does it really well. Like, they're always bringing up the history of the story, you know, like, oh, okay, this is something that happened in the first film, this is something that happened in the second one, this is something that happened in the third, or like, you know, they're always bringing up references to it, and I personally find stuff like that endearing. Even if it's something that's incredibly dumb, I like when it's acknowledged. And Ghostface, despite not having personality, that's the thing, right? Like, you can't talk about Ghostface as a character because they're not a character. And I use the pronoun they because it's like, well, you have to consider not only has... actually, no, I just remembered the premise of the third one. You can't just see Ghostface as a he because it's not just a he, you know? You don't know who it is. It can be a she and it can be a he. So it really is... It's a they because you don't know, like, I guess you often associate it with a he because of the first movie, maybe, but, you know, anyone who is Ghostface or anyone who has that mask on, it's like there is no personality behind it, but they don't need it. And I think that that's something that's great about the character. You could literally put anyone behind that mask and nothing would change. Like, you know that it's like, okay, well, it's not the same person as it was before. That doesn't matter because now it's about finding out who is behind the mask. And that sets up for a great story and a great mystery, I think. I'm not going to pretend that, like, the Scream movies are, they're great, like, mysteries and they're great stories. They're not perfect by any means, but I do like that sense of entertainment you get from these films. Because it stops being just about the horror. It stops being about sometimes even the gore. It's more about you as the audience trying to deduce, along with the main characters, like, who is behind this? Who can I trust? Who do I not trust? You know, stuff like that. When it comes to the relationships between the main characters, you know, I don't hate them personally. I don't really think they add much to the story, but I don't think they take anything away from it either. you do need some leverage every now and then. It's like I've said before. You come to see these characters, like you come to see Ghostface in this case, but at the same time, I feel like in this case with this series, because Ghostface doesn't really have much of a personality, you don't want to see him on screen all the time. And I think that that's where it really meets its leverage, and the fact that you have these relationships between the main characters, and that sort of distracts a little bit from the fact that Ghostface is out there, and in a good way. It distracts in a good way, because if we were like I said, if we're concentrating on the character the whole time, I think it gets stale really quick, and that's something that I'm kind of glad doesn't happen. I don't think any of the movies are necessarily stale. Sure, they follow a pattern, but they're all different, because like I said, you're always trying to figure out who's behind the mask. And I think that sets up for great things, you know. He has presence, you know. The character has certainly presence. Whenever he's around, you know something's going to happen, and it's kind of spooky, actually. So for a character that I didn't ever take seriously, and for me to end up really liking his movies, that's a great feat. I like that. As for this piece, it was probably up until this point, and I think probably in the entirety of Creepy Month this year, Inktober, it was the easiest one to draw. It was by far the easiest one to draw. It was just a shape, and especially because I've drawn him before. I actually made some prints for my kitchen back in Mexico last year for Halloween. That stayed up for most of the year, but most of the rest of the year at least. But I did have fun drawing it. My only gripe with this drawing is that it took me because there's so much black in the drawing, and I didn't want to use the paint tool, so I had to just manually do every single scribble and line to fill the black in, and it took otherwise this video would be like 2 minutes long, because it really didn't take me that long to draw the face. Otherwise it would have taken forever. But yeah, I guess a little bit more on that little imprint that I did. Halloween was coming up, and we celebrated at my house, and our walls in the kitchen weren't really painted at all. So what my mom let me do was I made like I don't know what they're called, but it was kind of like a mask of paper, and I made Ghostface's face on it, and then with a black spray can, I sprayed it onto our kitchen wall, and I made two different ones. One was way more. The second one was really, really clean, and it looked really nice. But the first one, I guess I applied too much paint on it, and it started spreading and dripping, and it looked super creepy, and I loved it. But anyway, this is the final result. Ghostface, again, the Scream movies. If you haven't checked them out, I would suggest you do so, because I do like them as movies. I like them as mystery movies more so than horror movies. But either way, I do think they're very entertaining, and I would recommend you go watch them. This was really easy. This was really sort of fun. But tomorrow we are going to venture into one of the last horror movie villains. I think we're like halfway done with Movie Monster Week. I won't reveal who it is. You'll have to check out tomorrow to see who it is. But until next time, stay safe and stay awesome. This is Char5, signing off.